Good afternoon. My name is Ronaldo Hilton, Chairperson Designee of the New York City Loft Board. Welcome to our September 19th, 2019 public meeting. Section 282 of the New York State Multi-Dwelling Law establishes the New York City Loft Board. The board is charged with overseeing the conversion of interim multi-dwellings from commercial and manufacturing spaces to safe, rent-regulated residences that comply with the minimum standards of safety and fire protection stated in Article 7b of the New York State Multi-Dwelling Law. To achieve this goal, the board adjudicates and mediates disputes between owners and tenants, tracks the progress of each building undergoing legalization, and prosecutes parties who violate the loft law and the loft board rules. In the interest of time, we're going to forego the minutes and go right into a presentation that we have and by members of the Department of Buildings. 3 members of DOB's Technical Affairs Office will be presenting about the project guidelines. They are Marshall Kaminer, Executive Engineer, DOB Technical Affairs and Co-Development. Then I have Maria Zanarina. She's a Co-Development Architect, I'm sorry. And Hauson, who is also Housing Maintenance Co-Development Architect with the unit. So while we recognize and understand the need for questions and clarifications, time is also limited. Therefore, I'm asking everyone's cooperation and understanding, limiting the questions in length and depth. The presenters will not necessarily be able to go into questions that are too technical and also policy related. I know that the team will entertain questions outside of today's meeting, also by email if there are any, something the board would like follow up on. Mr. Kaminer has agreed to take any kind of question follow-up from you by email. So without further ado, Mr. Kaminer and team, thank you. Thanks for coming and thanks for taking the time to do this.
Thank you. So in general, just so you know, you can contact construction codes at buildings.nyc.gov. Oh, you don't hear me? In general, you can contact construction codes at buildings.nyc.gov with any questions, and then we can parse it out among ourselves about the audience. Okay, so to start the presentation, I thought we should give you a little bit of a background. What I have is a handout that I also gave to Elaine. Actually, I guess she handed it out already. Are the actual website links to what's already been posted on our website since August 9, 2019. At the request of City Hall and the request of this board, the Department of Buildings was requested to clarify the loft law, in particular MDL 277, and what's written there and how exactly we would go about approving it. They felt it was necessary because the scope of loft law IMDs has been expanding. It's been going beyond simply what was, I guess, in Article 1, Chapter 5 of the zoning resolution to other zoning districts throughout the city, and so there was a need for this. All right. In terms of an overview and highlights of the law, of what we did for the guidelines, we, of course, went into MDL Section 277. I just wanted to write up there, MDL 280, the concept of a de facto multiple dwelling, which weighed heavily into developing these guidelines and trying to clarify what's required by the multiple dwelling law. As a result of that section in the code, we basically are following MDL 277 in the sense that mostly 1968 code references are referenced. There is some code that isn't referenced, and we did have to fill it in with current code, such as electrical code, plumbing code. Not really a lot of that in the MDL. Similarly, with accessibility and fire protection, there is some discussion in the MDL about fire protection, but it's quite limited. And accessibility, there's nothing. So we again decided that the fairest way to do this would be to develop this along the lines of MDL window periods of when these particular IMDs have been legalized. I'm sorry, IMDs have been set into motion as opposed to legalized. Sorry, that's my job. Zoning, in terms of zoning, as a result of the de facto concept, of MDL 280 rather, there really was very limited zoning to be applied. We felt that we could get into the realm of allowing obviously non-conforming, meaning the use is not appropriate for the neighborhood, but also to allow non-complying depending on when this particular window period was occurring. Again, that's if the thing is existing, and we worked very closely with the Loft board, meaning Elaine and Ronaldo and everyone here, to determine what was there during this window period. As a result of that, Zoning Resolution Article 1, Chapter 5, 015, we're really not applying to it unless it's also a joint living work quarter area, and then it would also have a use group 17D designation. Okay, and also if you were to read ZR 15, we'd also see that's very limited districts just in Manhattan. And lastly, we will be incorporating a little bit of HMC. The only thing that I could actually find when I was doing it was something about like the bathroom shouldn't be too close to the kitchen, but there is some application of HMC that we will be enforcing. Okay, so the concept of de facto multiple dwelling, I just wanted to put it up here. This is directly out of the multiple dwelling law. It's basically trying to, a form to legalize these buildings, and as such, we want to look at the window period, and we basically use this interpretation in our writing of the guidelines. Okay, the guidelines are broken up into various sections. Just so you know, we do have other guidelines on the DOB website for fire protection and for plumbing and things like that. These are a little bit different in the sense that we have an MD section, a multiple dwelling law section exclusively. So we divided that up into MD1 through MD9 in terms of a general category of mostly for a designer. How would a designer approach trying to legalize these things in conformance with the multiple dwelling law and all the codes that are available. And I'm going to try to go into a few of these in the coming slides, but this is the approach. Also different than the other guidelines is, in the other guidelines, we pretty much want the applicants to do everything, right? We want to give them the code. So what we're really going to do is give you all the code sections, or we want them to do the zoning, and again, all we're going to do is give you all the zoning sections. But in these guidelines, because of, I guess, the arduous text in the multiple dwelling law, we decided to also accompany these with some explanations of what we would like to see. So as an example, you see in the very first box up above, we actually list the sections that are applicable. But we also have a second section where we're talking about, this particular section. So in particular, I'm going to read from the slide now. Because MDL 26.1 permits the use of local zoning ordinance to determine yard and court dimensions, and lawful existing non-complying yards and courts are permitted under 054, all lawful existing yards and courts in IMD buildings shall be considered as being in compliance. So that's a big thing, right? I'm sure that a lot of the applicants probably had some issues with this in the past, especially if they were saying, actually in particular, if they were saying, look, my bedroom has been there forever. That window has been there forever. That size yard has been there forever. And we're trying to work with that now. Okay, as opposed to saying, you better look in the zoning resolution, even when you read these particular sections, they say it should comply with the current zoning resolution. So they are still complying with the zoning resolution, but they're complying with it in the sense of it being lawfully non-complying, lawfully non-conforming. To a point. Obviously, if there's something like a violation that's on the property, that would be a red flag, and we wouldn't do that, meaning they built it illegally or something like that. The next, again, just a general thing, where enlargement's generally not allowed. So this one is more of a clarification. MDL 277 in this particular section talks about enlargements. It says that you could do a mezzanine and you could pop up through the roof of the building and all this stuff. However, the Loft board typically is not allowing this. So we're stating that in this letter, and we're going to be working more closely with the Loft board so that we understand when enlargements will be allowed or when they will not be allowed. Interior mezzanines, really interior balconies, that's referred to in MDL 277. Again, we're trying to clarify what we would accept. As you can see, there are some references to current code here, terms of ceiling height and things like that, because it's just not clear in the MDL. So we tried to incorporate it and get everyone on the same page. Another objective of these guidelines is to put everybody on the same page. So we want you to be aware of our thought process when the examiners are reviewing it. So we're putting it out there for you in this particular case. Okay, again, this is clarifying the same thing in terms of interior balconies, when it could be used as storage, when it could be used as an office. I know that there were some questions in the past about rooms that were maybe very, very much in the interior, provided, so for this, for example, provided a particular office is in the interior, but you're getting some kind of ventilation, which I'll get into later. That would probably be acceptable, provided you don't have like a string of offices in the middle of such an IMD. Legalization of light and air, again, it's the same concept that we're going into. The thing that I wanted to talk to you about the guidelines here is that we have created tables. So rather than going through that arduous text in the MDL, these guidelines have actually put together some tables for you to look and to find out where exactly I could look or not look that might be of some assistance. Again, I think I already discussed this about the light and air and where things are acceptable or not acceptable. Okay, another thing we added is we added diagrams. So if you go up and actually, I didn't print the text here, but if you actually read the text, it's difficult. So here we presented a diagram to explain what we would like to see if there's a rear yard line, the 30-foot, in terms of a court, what the minimum dimension is, and we added those into it. We didn't really deviate too much from the text here, but the diagrams are an added item. Again, similarly here for a corner lot, again, more diagrams. Okay, again, for light and ventilation, again, the point of this particular thing is to, again, try to clarify the text with diagrams, because most of the people who are doing this are architects, and this is what they work with, as opposed to, I guess, attorneys, which, and trying to really plow through all this different text. Same thing. This is, again, we're just trying to go through the distances between the buildings and explain the different text. Okay, minimum room sizes has been an issue. This is, again, an issue that we tried to clarify, especially with the dwelling unit side. I believe, again, MDL 277 indicated something about 1,500 square foot minimum. However, MDL 281.5 allowed 400. So again, the guidelines tried to clarify this of what's needed. We also talked about the benefits, I guess, that you get if you do have a 1,500 square foot dwelling unit, as opposed to a 400 square foot dwelling unit. The other thing that we clarified is TPPN 9 of 93. So this is very active. It's still an active TPPN, even though it's from, what is it now? 30, how many years?
36.
36 years ago.
26.
Thank you, 26 years ago. So we tried to clarify this particular one because we were getting a lot of different a lot of different interpretations on this particular one. So the little diagram to the right is essentially saying we're really asking for an open pass-through kind of thing on this particular room, and then we could allow these kinds of vestibules, which would be okay. They're called, I believe, ventilating windows. So what we obviously don't want is like a non-operable piece of glass that they'll then put a shade. But if it's an opening, I think what they were asking for before was maybe an actual doorway or just partitions that ended and were open. But I think that we were okay with this kind of an arrangement where it's just an opening. And as we read the text more clearly, it seemed like this is the way we wanted to go. Parking. There has been some issues with parking in the past in the sense that they felt that this is a conversion, and as such, sometimes a new parking space might be required per the zoning resolution. Again, if we use the concept of de facto multiple dwelling, we're essentially saying that it's a lawfully non-compliant condition, and the fact that there may not be a parking space for this is acceptable if that's the case. If they actually want to add parking, then that's different, and they will have to comply with current code regulations. But if they're just saying, look, I only have one spot instead of having two, or I have no spots, and we're saying a conversion might trigger one, we're essentially going with the de facto argument and saying it's okay. We can, provided you can at least prove that it was lawful, we're good to go. Egress, again, we clarified the main thing is what I wrote in red at the very bottom. There seemed to have been some confusion about going to earlier than 1968 codes, even though the MDL 277 really only referenced 68 codes. So we're trying to make it very clear we don't want 10-story, buildings that have 4 hours of fire rating between floors, but one means of egress in such a building, even though that was allowed in 1909. We'd like at a minimum what's referenced in 277 and the 1968 codes. Again, we talk about entrance halls and lobbies, minimum size. Here, it's just really the asterisk is what I'm talking about in the sense that 2 foot 8 inch clear, even though it's in the MDL, there could be some accessibility issues depending on the window period, which I'll get to in a few coming slides. But we recognize it's here. So if you're in like the very first window period, which is before local law 58 of 87, then this is okay, right? Then you can have the 2 foot 8. There's not really an accessibility issue going on, but if you're in any later ones, then we're going to have an issue, and you're going to have to comply with that particular local law. And in the last window period that we did, I guess that was, what year is the last?
It's 2015 to 2016.
Yeah, then you would have to comply with the 2014 code for accessibility for that. Okay, again, materials and what they're using. So the purpose of this particular one, by referring to the 2014 code, if you're replacing a handrail, if you're replacing treads, if you're replacing materials, we don't really want you going onto eBay, to order materials to match it unless they're safe. We're typically, like looking at plumbing, I don't want you to go and get some ancient kind of lead-based pipe to put in as a substitution. We would like the materials at least to be up to current code, up to current standards. We don't want to go back into history to try to find materials. Obviously, if it's a landmark issue or things like that, that's different. It's a cornice, something like that. Again, the point of this is more charts. So instead of the text, we're decided to give everybody some charts. It's talking about maximum heights, building maximum depths, when you can have a standpipe, when you don't need a standpipe, and fire rating requirements. So again, this is all online. It's not like it's just in the slide presentation. This again is just the standard stuff. MDL 56 mostly prohibits wood frame. That is state put. Clarification of some terms here. There is a term used, incombustible, because again they refer to the 68 code all the time. We're interpreting that to mean whatever's in the 1968 code for non-combustible. There seem to have been some arguments about that in the past. All right, MD6 again, stairway construction. This, again, is sometimes a sprinkler is required, sometimes it's not required. The thing about this slide, which again I'll get into in a little bit, is the sprinklers also we based on the window period of when this particular IMD became an IMD. And we're going to decide what provisions to apply in addition to the MDL 277 provisions here. Interior iron columns, we actually kept this. It's definitely unique to the multiple dwelling law, but we have kept this and just clarified what was in the text. Okay, and again, we're just doing this to maintain safety. Where, again, in addition to the MDL 277 requirements, we are going to be requiring some code requirements. Essentially, if it's prior to a particular law, then again, it's mostly MDL. If it's the second or third window period, you will have to comply with the code at that time. We understand there probably is going to be some massaging going on, because some of the stuff in the MDL, like what I just showed you with protecting exposed steel members and things like that, that's not really backed up in the code or any fire science as far as I know, but we are going to keep that and then supplement that with the code as needed. Okay, so that was it for the actual multiple dwelling law section. So the other sections of the guidelines include code and include the zoning, okay? So the particular thing with code, as we discussed, would be accessibility, elevator, again, sprinkler coverage, energy, flood. So these things are not covered in the multiple dwelling law, and we did have to address this in the code. Again, we're going back to the de facto argument here, and therefore bulk parking environmental. When it comes to zoning, we're trying to be as lenient as possible. This is, again, I believe this is also on our website, and this is explaining, the various places where you would look. So you see sprinkler coverage is covered in 3 different places, right? 2 different codes, and the MDL. Accessibility is, again, 68 code and 2000, again, depending on the window period. It's just an overview. So I just wanted to show on this particular one, the point of this is just that in general, when it comes to code, to a lot of this, we're referring the individual back to the multiple dwelling law section, meaning we already discussed the code or whatever the requirement is there. So we didn't want to duplicate our efforts, and also we didn't want to create another error in case it wasn't exactly the same as what we had said before. But there's a lot of referring back, as you can see. So accessibility, again, what we're doing is we're trying to apply the various window periods to it, and to get right down to it, if the MDL window period is between 4/1/1980 and 12/1/1981, which means it had to have been lawfully occupied as a dwelling unit at that time to become an IMD, then it's prior to the effective date of Local Law 58 of 87, and we don't need to comply with accessibility. You can, of course, always do it. We're not adverse to it. If you want to make the building or the dwelling unit accessible, it's fine, but it's not required. We had a discussion with MOPD about this as well, so they at least understand this. Sure.
MOPD.
Oh, MOPD is the Mayor's Office for Persons with Disabilities. Second bullet, if the MDL is the most current one, which is between 2015 and 2016, that is after the enactment of the 2014 code. Therefore, we would be applying accessibility requirements for that. And for the middle window period, we would be applying Local Law 58 of 87, which is still less strict than the 2014 code requirements, but we felt like this was the best approach. Similarly, for elevators, I just want to say again, the accessibility is basically the same. If you're in that window period and you have a building where you're using it, we would apply accessibility for that elevator in the same way. The other thing that we did add in this particular code outside of accessibility for window periods is the fact that if you are going to be using an old freight elevator for passengers, we want it to be up to the current code for passengers. We want it to truly be a passenger elevator. We don't want to see any guillotine type doors. We don't want to see anything like that. Okay, so again, this is where I talked about it must be a code compliant if you're converting it. That's in addition to the accessibility. Fire protection, again, the same thing. From 80 to 81, since it's prior to local law 10 of 99, only the sprinkler coverage in MDL 277 can be applied. We're okay with that. If it's between 2008 and 2009, which includes local law 10 of 99, we are requesting that the 68 code be applied. And then obviously if it's the 2015 to 16, then it's the current code for sprinkler. As I'm looking at this, I do have to look at the logic because 80, I'll have to look at that first bullet again. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, in terms of, again, all new equipment, unless in general we want all new equipment to comply with current codes. We don't, again, want somebody shopping on eBay to try to find old components, unless it's needed to match the system, so long as it's not less safe. But in general, if they're like replacing a wing or something like that, or if they have to install sprinklers, we want the current UL listings and everything else for such equipment. Energy code compliance, again, it's minimal. Essentially, the requirement in the energy code is if you're touching that particular wall or you're touching that particular floor, then you would have to make it code compliant or portion thereof. But in general, if you're not doing an extensive renovation, essentially you can just replace what's there again, so long as it's not less efficient. It's a similar philosophy with the energy code. Zoning, very limited application, as we discussed already, I guess, numerous times about, because we're using the concept of de facto. ZR 15 is not applied to an IMD, but it still will be applied to a joint living work quarter. It's provided it's also labeled use group 17. Parking, again, we're not doing that because of the de facto concept. Unless it's new parking, then we would have to take a look at it. Little e, at the moment we feel that this is also not a trigger. However, because there are some potentially hazardous contamination conditions, which I don't think is very typical in it, we're probably just going to work very closely with the Loft board on this to make sure that maybe this is not part of the IMD portion, because that would probably involve disturbing the soil, which is not really a typical IMD. Air quality impacts, noise quality, meaning like a thicker glass is required by environmental if you're near a subway. In general, because it's not a conversion, we're viewing it as a de facto multiple dwelling. At this point, we don't feel it should apply. We again discuss this with that concept with city planning, and they're on board with that as well. However, little e also is another mayoral agency that we have to discuss it with, OER, and I just have to make sure that they're on board. So this came up. But I think this is how we're approaching it in general in terms of zoning. Okay, again, the bulk, we're looking to be as accommodating to non-compliance as possible. That's basically what we're doing in terms of the plan. Okay, parking we went over already. And lastly, I think I even went over this about HMC. There's only this one thing about kitchens adjacent to bathrooms that I could find, but HMC would be applied. So it is a New York State law, so DOE just interprets that anyway. We can't really vary it. Okay, so that's actually the end of my presentation. Sorry, I didn't look out over the audience before. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. I know this is a priority for everyone that's involved in the. I realize it's a priority for everyone, and I think over the last year or so, the Department of Buildings Technical Affairs unit kind of went full force in trying to get this done. We had a lot of input from the outside Loft community, and I really appreciate Marshall and all that you guys did. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
You don't have to leave. It's a public meeting.
I have a 3 o'clock.
I understand. Maria and Hal, thank you so much. 1 second.
We have a couple more.
Sure.
What's up?
Just first off, on your slide number 5, where you reference MDL 277 and you have a breakout of MD 1 through 9. Can you, MD1, MD2, MD3, those are your designations?
Yes, that's it.
They're not references to 270. Having just seen this now for the first time.
Like I said, you have a copy, you can go on our website and you can see the organization. So we tried to structure it similar to our other guidelines.
Right.
And that's where we got the numbering. MD, we just came up with as opposed to MDL because...
Okay, fine. I just wasn't clear what it was. And I didn't want to interrupt you. And throughout your presentation, which there's obviously a lot to look at here, and thank you for making the presentation, you seem to alternate between black type and red type. Is there some significance to
Yeah, that was for me, so I knew what to speak to.
Oh, okay. Okay. It sounded like it's going to link me anywhere.
No.
All right.
It'll link you to the and how I think.
All right. That's interesting. And I guess my last question is just, if I understand what's been explained to us as non-professionals, the purpose of this exercise is, number one, to kind of clarify where we are with conversion, things to be taken into account by the buildings department. And then, am I correct, this is also going to allow DOB to train a number of examiners in different boroughs to kind of smooth the highway to...
Yeah, so basically we're very open, definitely about the MDL part, right? We're really open about it, and the examiners are getting training in all of that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the training has already started. They, as well as everybody here, as well as the applicant community, they have to digest it, you know, and they're going to come back in a couple of weeks, and hopefully they read it and have some good questions for them. But it's a lot.
Almost everything that's covered in here we've discussed at some point or another in the time that I've been on the board, which is only 9 months. So it's important.
I had one question. You didn't mention energy code. Did you take a look at it?
No, we did look
Oh,
at
there
the
was?
energy code.
Okay.
So the energy code, we're really just applying it is if you touch the wall or you touch the floor, then you will have to comply. So we're not viewing it as a conversion. And similarly, I believe there's even a monetary threshold, which I highly doubt you're going to get to in most IMPs. You know, if you're converting a whole building, there might be some issues going on, but if you're converting one unit in a half manufacturing, half dwelling unit building, I don't think in a mostly manufacturing building and maybe there's one or two dwelling units, I don't think the energy code is really going to be a hindrance to the design.
No, I like the energy code. I want, I figure you got one chance.
Well, it's hard, the energy code, even for a normal building, they really don't want you, like, if you're, pretty much it's the same thing. I mean, basically, if you touch it, unless you're doing some major renovation, you only have to worry about the part that you touched. I think where the issues were coming in before is the concept of conversion, which we're trying to get away from, and we're going toward the concept of de facto.
Okay.
It's just little e versus e. What's little e?
Little e versus big E, or
I guess.
no. So little e stands for environmental, and this is something that's in the zoning resolution. And if you were to look at a zoning district map, there are designations of little e. And when you look into the index of the zoning resolution, they explain to you in little e that you have to, there's some environmental concern. It's typically like there used to be a gas station there, and if you go to excavate, you better take care because the soil's crap.
Or watch factory.
So, but there's also other things in there about being adjacent to subway L's and things like that, and the glass, things like that. So that's something that we went over with city planning, and they were okay with the concept of de facto, but I neglected to go over that with OER. So we do have to run that by OER, just like we ran it by city planning and we ran it by MOPD. We also have to have a conversation with OER, which hasn't really occurred yet. Okay.
How many examiners have you been training? Do you have a number?
Yeah, so we have select examiners in each office. It's typically, I guess, 2 in each office, plus we have a hub division. So we're going to have at least 12 to 18 examiners dedicated just to this. So we again, at the moment, we're trying to keep it out of the general examiner population, and we want to train the particular examiners on what to do this. So if a Loft Law project comes in, an IMD, we want to assign it to a particular examiner. We don't just want to send it out as a general examination.
I had one more question, but it might be too technical. I feel like this one has big implications, the bedroom with the
little
alcove.
Yeah.
And it says parallel to, which in the past you've been able to do different directions. And
well, we're still looking at somewhat parallel, yeah. Well, it's not geometry, if the lines meet a little bit.
Yeah, because this is very limiting that everyone would have an elevation with a door and a window like that.
Well, they do need an opening, right? So you can't just have a closed room. The point of the alcove is that if it opens into a larger area, and that particular larger area has a window of sufficient size, then the alcove is fine, and we'll take it. But the parallel, well, obviously, like if it's at a right angle, we might have some issues. We have to take.
And then in relation to the door to the room versus the window opening, so it seems like, I guess I'm just wondering if there might be a few more diagrams that offer some
What you see
possibilities.
is pretty much what's online.
Because it
took us a few meetings to get to that point.
Because I don't think that would work in a lot of spaces, but
Well,
in terms of, it would,
well, but this is, I believe the alcove we're viewing as a habitable room, right? Yeah. So if you have other rooms that are just occupiable, like an office, or also we are trying to expand the concept of occupiable.
okay.
Because the MDL does have a concept of living room, which is a little bit odd. So offices, are fine, provided you have like 1 per apartment is okay. But the alcove is actually a habitable kind of thing, and that's why we need a fair amount of light and air. But we decided, based on the TPPN, that was the best interpretation. That was what was meant. It's a little odd, right? It looks like a ticket booth or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to limit that everyone
But I
has to
think
look
it's
like
still more favorable than what people were previously requesting, which was like a doorway or something, so you could still have some flexibility. If you want to make a doorway, it's fine, you can still do that.
that. Okay.
Okay?
On another wall.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's what you have to use, I'm just saying that's sort of your minimum.
Okay.
Can I just also clarify, and you can have more than one alcove, right?
Yes, you can have more than one, not more than one office. More.
Yeah, I'll follow up. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Great.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys, I appreciate it, we appreciate it. So we next turn our attention to the vote of the minutes from the July 11th, 2019 public meeting. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes? If there are no comments, yes.
Sorry. Yeah, page 5, this is July 11th, right?
Yes.
Page 5, the 1 to 3rd comment attributed to you, Mr. Chair, I think is reversed in that the cellar has less than 1/2 of the livable space below grade and the basement has more below grade.
The cellar has less than 1/2 of the livable space below grade. That's it's not correct. Cellar has,
I think it's flipped.
Yeah.
cellar has, oh yeah, I'm sorry, yes. Did I say that? I said that.
But I should have caught that too. I know that that's not right.
It meant above grade. I
Yeah.
meant less than 1/2 above grade, not below. Thank you.
Oh, okay, so the change
Is the above.
is change below to above?
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you with those corrections. Do I have a motion to accept, from someone to accept the minutes?
Motion.
Mr. Roche, a second? Ms. Moskowitz. Then Ms. Rivera?
Flowers,
Yes.
Mr. Roach,
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez, Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
Ms. Roseman,
Yes.
Chairperson Hudson.
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 abstain.
We next turn to the minutes from the July 18th public meeting. Are there any corrections or comments to the meeting minutes? Mr. Delaney.
On page 2, I had asked a question about the situation with the voting if all the special interest positions aren't filled. And Ms. Balsam, you said, you did ask, but I don't remember the answer. I'll forward that. I don't
I
think.
didn't forward it?
I don't
Sorry.
think so.
Okay, sorry.
And then you, at one point not too long ago, distributed a chart that we said wasn't finished of code compliance deadlines for the various iterations to it. Is that, have we completed that? Is it, because I'd asked you if it was distributable to the public, and you said we're still working on it.
Oh, yes, it has been completed. I'll send you the latest one. Okay?
Yeah. Page 13, middle of the page, just think what Ms. Balsam says they can ask for me extensions, I think it should be, they can ask
I
me.
guess me for extensions.
And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Then is there a motion then to accept these minutes with these well, there are no corrections, right? There's just, yeah, with those corrections. Any comments? Any motion to accept? Thank you. Ms. Roslin has made a motion. Anyone? And a second, Mr. Roche. Then Mr. Rivera, could you please poll the board members?
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Delaney?
Yes.
Ms. Torres?
Yes.
Ms. Roseman?
Yes.
Chairperson Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor, 2 absent.
Ms. Balsam will now present her executive director's report.
So the first thing is the website. So the DOB communications staff is continuing their work on the website. Hopefully they will be done very soon. I'm not exactly sure where they are in the process, but they keep calling me and asking for things, so they are actually working on it.
Can I just interject with that? It's a huge lift. I just want to ask for patience. The website is being coordinated not just between the Loft Board and our team at DOB, IT team, but also with Do It, another agency who has to convert all city websites to kind of have the same look, and it's for the good or better. It's what the policy of the administration is, to make all the websites look the same, and so Do It is also overwhelmed with all this, and so while most of the major agencies have gone through their own conversions and are in the process still doing it, a small little agency called the Loft Board now has to take back. We're not insignificant, but we're but we're not as huge as, say, fire department or even DOB, for example. But so please be patient. I understand this has been promised for a long time, but it's coming. Thanks.
Sorry, yeah. Okay, in terms of staffing, I introduced Adi Lear, new attorney at the last meeting, but she's still here, yay. And we have concluded interviewing for the, vacant attorney position, and we have identified a candidate, so that is in process, so we're very happy about that. In terms of revenue, we had a great July, $952,905, and in August, $103,560. So of course, that's the registration fees for the buildings. That's when we usually get the bulk of our money.
Is that $1 million?
Yeah,
For the
it
summer?
is.
Oh, that's nice.
As of September 1st, 2019, we have 335 buildings under our jurisdiction. 68 buildings have not renewed their registrations, so we will be starting the failure to renew process and sending out the notices. So if there are any owners out there that haven't paid their registration, just know, please get your money in, because we will ask the board to fine you if you don't. In litigation, we have one new case. It is 475 Kent Owner LLC versus New York City Loft Board and Andrew Ohanesian. You may remember this is the parking space case. So the owner is challenging the Loft Board order that found that the parking space was a required service. The owner is arguing that 29 RCNY 2-04C, which is the Loft Board rule that states there must be no diminution of services, is ultra vires, meaning the Loft Board exceeded their authority in passing that rule, because the Loft law only allows the Loft Board to pass rules regarding housing maintenance issues, and a parking space is not a housing maintenance issue. So obviously we don't agree with that position, but that is the owner's position. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Boston. Any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have one question. This PDF, and I noticed the PowerPoint rather, the slight differences that were in the one that
Oh.
Mr. Cameron exhibited. I don't think they're significant, but would I be correct to presume this is a public document?
It's on the website, yeah.
Okay.
It's on the DOB website, so, yes.
Is it newly, because when we were checking it, it just had a little bit of info. There's no PDF downloadable
There isn't, no, it's not a PDF, it's web pages.
web pages.
Yeah, and that's why he gave you the links, because it's so difficult to find, particularly, I think, for designers. I know. I totally agree.
This, I didn't want to hector Mr. Kaminer on this point, but there was a certain amount of back and forth between people saying, where is it, I can't find it. And obviously also, and I know this is kind of the special world of both city planning and to a certain extent DOB, you get all these acronyms thrown at you with no explanation of what they are. I mean,
Yeah.
the HMC, you know, so, but presumably, like, if I were a plans examiner and I was going to Loft Law Academy to get my little specialized button,
Right.
is there a hardbound version of this they get, or are they like just surfing around? How's it supposed to work? I mean, we waited a long time for these guidelines, and it's a little confusing as to.
So the the guidelines are broken up on the website in the area of relevance to the person who needs the information. So the architect engineer, which we call the professional, New York State professional, has their link and kind of, you know, stuff that everything is not relevant to them, but the major stuff that they have to be concerned with are in their area. Then as a tenant or as a landlord, you need to go into that by the, you know, into those areas, right? Can it be better? Of course, and I think you're welcome to send those comments. I think those are the easy stuff for them to do, because it's not their doing that it's broken up that way, right? It is the guidelines do it. Yeah, I mean, literally, you have to set up the website a certain way. If you look at every agency website now, you'll see a tab, so people easily searchable and all that stuff for them, relevant stuff for them. So the PDF version that was circulated to folks who reviewed it is all the information. But you won't find all the information in one particular area here. But trust me, the plan examiners who are doing this would have all that stuff at their fingertips. It's not going to be like they're looking for stuff either, like we are right now. And I hear you about the acronyms. I think it's all technical talk. I mean, it's, so you ever get briefed by a military guy before, you'll hear him talk about that kind of stuff too, and not really recognizing their audience. But yeah, but I think those are the type of things that they're open to your comments with. It wasn't his design of the website. He presented material, and someone else took the material and broke it up. So if you think that there's a piece that's missing from what you think you should be as an architect or as an owner or as a tenant, think that this piece of information should be under your tab on the website, please let us know, or any such clarification. They will do that. They're very open to that. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Katie. So there's any other any questions or comments for Ms. Balsam? Thank you, Ms. Balsam. So we must now turn to vote on the cases. There are two cases on the appeals and the reconsideration calendar. The first is Amicus Associates Limited Partnership at this 83 Canal Street, Manhattan. That docket number is AD0095, and Ms. Balsam will present this case.
Before I go into the full spiel, I just want to point out that there is a typo on page 3. So we are going to fix that. In the second paragraph, second line, the rule states the executive director may only insert the word grant one extension of the code compliance deadlines. So this is an owner request for a second extension, which was denied because the Loft Board rules don't allow for second extensions. It was also denied because the owners did not meet the statutory standards, and that was in an administrative determination. The owner appealed that determination, and the reason for the denial was that the owner had waited 7 months before requesting access from tenants, although they had had an architect many months before that. They waited until the last possible moment to file their all-one application, and they also waited until the last possible moment to file for their second extension. The owner, in their argument, the owner said that the executive director was misinterpreting the rule, and that the problem, they met the statutory standards because the reasons that they couldn't move forward was that the Loft Board didn't schedule a narrative statement conference and DOB did not schedule a plan exam, but the law clearly puts the burden on the owner to move the process along. And in terms of the narrative statement conference, the owner did not request an expedited narrative statement. They said nothing. They just filed the documents right before the deadline that they had for that. And in terms of the plan examination, it's up to the owner to request a plan examination. DOB does not schedule plan examinations unless you request one. So the proposed order recommends denying the appeal and keeping the administrative determination in place.
Thank you, Ms. Walson. Is there a motion to accept this case? Mr. Delaney, is there a second? Mr. Barwas. Any comments? No comments. Mr. Rivera, could you please poll the board members?
I'm sorry, I can just make one comment. I thought this was very clearly written, and it's helpful to have a decision that kind of has the board reaffirm the executive director's interpretation of how the extension scheme is currently working under the existing rules.
Thank you. As it is with all our decisions, they are team efforts. The writing is always a team effort.
I'll comment for the record that this is some food for thought in terms of some issues that we would like to, I believe we should revisit when we're discussing and voting.
Thank you, Mr. Roswell. With no other comments, Mr. Rivera?
Mr. Bowers?
Yes.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Delaney?
Yes.
Ms. Torres?
Yes.
Ms. Grossman?
Yes.
Chairperson Middleton?
Yes.
6 in favor, 2 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. The next case on the appeal for consideration calendar is 470 Manhattan Avenue, LLC.
I think it's 7.
Here.
I'm sorry, what was that correction?
7. 7 in favor, 2 absent.
Oh, okay, thank you. 470 Manhattan Avenue, LLC. The address is 18 through 20 Eckford Street in Brooklyn. The docket number is AD 0029. Excuse me, 99. AD 0099. Ms. Cruz, could you please present this case?
In 2016, the owner registered 9 units as IMD units. In 2017, the owner and the tenants began the narrative statement process. While attending the narrative statement conferences, the owner also was engaged in plan review at the Department of Buildings. On February 22nd of 2018, because the owner described the building as a wood frame structure, the plan examiner issued an objection noting that the building cannot be converted to a residential building containing more than 3 residential units. On May 8th of 2019, the owner filed an application seeking the coverage of the building based on DOB's objection. On May 23rd, the executive director issued an administrative determination suspending the answer period for the coverage application and directing the owner to serve revised plans. The owner did not do so, but instead, he did file an appeal challenging the administrative determination. In the appeal, the owner makes 2 arguments. First, the owner argues that the staff usurped the Loft Board's authority. Second, the owner argues that the application should be referred to the board immediately. As explained in the proposed order before you today, the staff did not usurp the board's authority. The staff only held the decoverage claim in abeyance temporarily to investigate the claim. The staff has the authority to take this action. Pursuant to Section 106J1 of the Loft Board's rules, the staff has the authority to investigate claims raised in the application, conduct informal conferences, and if necessary, request additional information. The owner also seeks an immediate referral of the application to the Loft Board for a final order. However, the Loft Board rules do not provide for automatic referral. Before the coverage application can be presented to the Loft Board, the Loft Board's due process rules must be followed. Due process includes the right to file an answer. The parties also have a right to present witnesses and cross-examine opposing witnesses. The owner must also present prima facie evidence demonstrating entitlement to the relief requested. Only after both sides have had an opportunity to present their evidence and there's a recommended decision, the matter will be presented to the Loft Board for a final order. To present the coverage application to a Loft Board without following these procedures would be a denial of the tenant's due process rights. Accordingly, the proposed order before you today denies the appeal application.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Is there a motion to accept this case? Mr. Barwas, is there a second? Mr. Delaney? Would entertain any comments on this? No comments. Ms. Rivera, could you please poll the board members?
Mr. Barrow?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Delaney?
Yeah.
Ms. Torres?
Yes.
Ms. Roseland?
Yes.
Chairperson Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor, 2 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, and 12, actually. No, 11, I'm sorry.
There are 6 cases on the summer calendar. They're voted on as a group. These cases are...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
On the summary calendar, I would ask that case number 5, 54 Knickerbocker, be voted on separately.
Sure. So there are 6 cases on the summer calendar. They'll be voted on as a group, with the exception of number 5, which will be voted on separately. These cases that I'm reading now will be voted on as a group. 517 through 525 West 45th Street LLC. The address is 517 through 525 West 45th Street, Manhattan. That docket number is LS0244. The next case is Zachary Trolyetsky at 151 Kent Avenue, Brooklyn. Docket number is PO0082. The next case is Catherine Manthi at 365 West 36th Street, Manhattan. Docket number TH0214. Then Cameron Brown at 33 Union Square West in Manhattan. Docket number TR1298. And finally, Phil Amos at 245 Varus Street. That docket number is TR1322. Is there a motion to accept these cases? Ms. Rothman, is there a second? Mr. Hernandez, thank you. Does anyone have any comments on these cases? No comments? Do we have, then, Mr. Rivera, could you please poll the board members?
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Delaney?
Yes.
Ms. Torres?
Yes.
Ms. Roseland?
Yes.
Chairperson Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor, 2 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. The next case voted on as part of the summer camp, voted on separately, is Amanda Eli at 54 Knickerbocker Avenue in Brooklyn. That docket number is TA0254. Do I have a motion to accept this case? Mr. Hernandez. Mr. Barwas is second. There must be comments. No comments?
Well, I'm gonna,
Yes.
I'll comment that While the reason we separated out does not follow quite suit of where we've been in past meetings, I understand in terms of principles, keeping it consistent. I know. Well, so at the
Well, let me, I plan to vote no on this case, and the reason is the tenant filed a rent dispute, then the tenant withdrew the application. Presumably, the tenant and the owner worked out some acceptable solution, but we have no idea what it is. That sets up a situation where, in my point of view, at some point, if 54 Knickerbocker Avenue ever gets legalized and there's a question of what the rent is for Unit 1C in the building, we're kind of working with a less than complete set of information. And just as in the case of buildings where a coverage application is made, I think it should be seen through to the end. I think once you raise, as either an owner or a tenant, a question about the rent, that should be settled and somehow be on the record. And I plan to write that up in an opinion, and it would seem to be more of a dissenting opinion than a concurring opinion, therefore I plan to vote no.
Well, not just the rent, the pattern of a dispute, whether it's about services or rent or coverage or repairs or whatever, that suddenly disappear generally. A lot of questions unanswered. I agree with Chuck on this one. And we've seen some other issues at this particular property that have gone the same way. They've come up and then gone away. Yeah.
So, just so I understand, where does that leave this case? I mean, here you have a settlement. There's nothing mandated by law for them to disclose the reason behind the settlement and so on, or the substance of the settlement. So where does that leave, I guess, maybe somebody could clarify what we do next. I mean, if this is not voted on, and if this is not approved by the board today, I'm not saying it won't, I'm just saying if it's not, then where does that leave the board? How could this order be rewritten in a way?
Well, there isn't the question, to what end does voting do? So voting down a recommendation or to accept a withdrawal of some sort of application or some sort of dispute doesn't necessarily get us the information we want, right? It doesn't lead to the conclusion that we want. It just leaves the case open. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
My question is if we vote this thing down, I agree with you, Chair, and can the staff provide any additional information that would
If we had had it.
If we vote this thing down, then it floats in nowhere, and there's going to be no resolution.
But if everything that comes before us is just voted yes because it's been withdrawn, without us understanding the background of why this application was withdrawn, then it feels very rubber stampy.
Yeah, but the thing is, maybe this thing is more dear than some of the others, but I've been troubled by, these stipulation agreements for years because we don't have the facts about them, and we keep on going through this process because an agreement was made, and we pass upon the agreement, very often not knowing what the agreement was. And sometimes I'm astounded that after you read all of this stuff, and then the person withdraws.
It's true, when there's like 50, you spend an hour reading through something, and you're like, wow, we're dismissing this, great. I get it.
So, I mean, the question is there a way for the board to compel, you know, some disclosure? And I think our lawyers are telling us no, correct? Is there any?
I mean, if they wanted more, we would have to put something in the rules.
So it, a couple of things. I sort of agree.
Before you go, I just want to react. So if something else would, if there is a rule today or tomorrow about this, would that also affect this case?
No.
So is here. Okay, go ahead.
So what I was going to say is I agree with my colleagues that it would be nice to have some of that information. However, I don't think we can somehow interject those wishes into this case. I think we have to change our policy at some point we determine moving forward. Because what we can't do is somehow or another interject that request here unless we're prepared to do it from here on out. So,
I'm prepared.
Yeah, we've so far.
well, I mean, that probably has to come with the rules. I mean,
Well, go ahead.
So, I mean, people can withdraw their applications for a lot of reasons, and I'm just wondering whether or not there might be unintended consequences. So let's say somebody had a personal reason for wanting to withdraw an application, like they decided to get divorced and they're going to move somewhere else, or they just can't afford it, or whatever. I mean, do we really want to force them to say that? So it's just something for you to think about. Like you think, oh, well, you know, something must have happened here and whatever, but there could be other reasons that people are withdrawing their applications that they don't want to disclose.
And it's quite possible too, we don't know, it's quite possible we don't know who got the benefit, or if this stipulation agreement was equally beneficial to both parties, but you know, we don't really know who got the bigger benefit in this, and it's, I think the assumption, a lot of times we're drawing we don't know what happened because usually the tenants are taken advantage of. I know that happens a lot, but we can't really draw that assumption in every case.
And my reservation in this case is not because I'm convinced that the tenant was taken advantage of. But the problem is, as I mentioned earlier, now the building reaches a code compliance milestone, the landlord is entitled to a percentage increase of the lawful rent, but we don't know what the lawful rent is. So that's where, in my opinion, letting these things go through, it just is kicking the hairball down the road, and the hairball is going to be bigger when we get to it, and if the building ever becomes legal and Ms. Eli is still there, then how do we parse all that at the time? And it ends up being a big fight at that point in time. In this case, leaving this one hanging for a while doesn't seem to be that deleterious. Presumably Ms. Eli either is or isn't paying the rent that's agreed upon. The landlord doesn't seem to be screaming. So at the moment, you know, I plan to vote no, so I can state why I vote no.
Well, I would suggest, if I have anything to do about this, that the chair table this thing, and then I would also ask the executive director whether or not, in a month's time, whether there could be more information to allow us to make some sort of sound decision on this.
Go ahead.
I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only way to really solve this is to change the rules. Okay, which I'm not saying we shouldn't do, but that's not going to happen within the next 30 or 60 days. So I go back to what I originally said. I think we have to determine, you know, we have to make the rule change, and then we have to go forward from that point. Now, that could mean that this case is left hanging in limbo for months. I mean, we've been working on the rules for roughly a year and a half, 2 years.
Right.
So.
And again, as Ms. Balsam explained, a rule change would not affect this case. Rule changes are not retroactively applied. So, Mr. Morris, with respect to your request that we table this, I think we should not. I mean, I'm not going to do that right now. Obviously, if the vote goes otherwise, then it will be automatically tabled. But I don't, staff has already said what they had to say on this, that there's nothing more that they could offer in terms of clarification on the settlement. And I think if I could just say this, we're all agreeing to some debate on this. And I would, I think we should do that in the coming months. Did this ever show? Yeah.
If we go to rules today.
If nobody's prepared to talk about it today.
Well, I'm just trying to.
Well, we're, so we'll, you have my commitment to kind of get this, some kind of debate started on this in the rules.
And my concern is that they've complied with what's required. We have zero understanding of what impact this may have on Miss Eli. But to prove a point, we may end up delaying this, and we don't know what negative impact or positive. We just don't know what impact will be borne by Ms. Eli because we want to make a point. The rules allow for this to happen. We may not agree with it, then we have the power to change that. And so we should change it going forward, but we have no ability to change this. And so we're going to leave this in purgatory, as he said, where it's going to get stuck there and months will go by. And I am concerned. Well, I don't know that we can have a conversation with Ms. Eli and be like, what happened?
Chuck, your concern about the final rent, how could that, I mean, does the tenant have recourse? Or not, that tenant is already gone, are you saying, right?
No,
she's
this one,
she may still be there, so if she's the one, she would have recourse.
This is the one, so the landlord did roll back the rent to what she discovered it to be the true rent, but only moving forward, and she was requesting the overpayment of the past rent.
Previous overpayment.
Thing is, I can neither vote for nor against it, nor abstain. So I'm planning to pass.
No pass. No pass allowed.
No, I'm allowed.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
So I think, but it's going to put us in a kind of purgatory somewhere.
Well, if you pass, it's definitely purgatory.
But in full conscience, I'm not sure I can vote yes on this or no on it. Basically because I don't have enough information to make those determinations.
Well, the point we're trying to make is that you will never have enough information to vote on this.
I understand. As I mentioned before, it disturbs me to no land with a lot of these.
This is where we make change. This is where we make change going forward. We're penalizing. We could potentially be
So it
penalizing
seems to
Ms.
me,
Eli.
that the chairman's promise to address this in the rules ought to give this a pass and let this go through, knowing that we're agreeing to move things forward. So I'm not real sure why anybody would vote no, and on this particular one, when we've been doing this for so many years past, why now? We single this one out and say.
So we've been voting no on, well, we've been voting, some of us have been voting no on all of these, on each one that's come before us for the past, say, 6 months, right, that have been suspect. For the reason that it's, one can't make a correct assessment of the situation without all the facts.
The assessment is that the person wants to withdraw the application. That's the end of it. The person does not want to litigate. For whatever reason it is, they don't want to go forward. So the application says, with respect to the rent, she can raise whatever claims of overcharge at the end of the process. At the end of the process, the owner will have a notice of RGB filing that he will have to file if this unit remains subject to rent regulation. She can dispute the rent about then. She can say, no, This owner is only entitled to collect the $2,500.
How about not voting, what's the impact? We're not giving her that.
No, there's no impact right now, except that the case sits
Yeah.
for,
Ever, at this
Yeah.
point, because we're not, there's nothing we can do from a rules perspective.
Because we don't know when the rules are going to.
Yeah, the rules are never gonna change, and it's not gonna go retro, so we're gonna be stuck in a place where she never gets this addressed.
And if the building does legalize, this would be an open application and we couldn't remove it.
So, my suggestion to the board members is that we vote the law, as we can, not necessarily conscience right now, because there's nothing really to address the conscience issues unless we go and have a real debate and put it in the rules going forward. And I think this is a great starter, a great, I guess, something that can get us going and propel us to move and put something in the rules so we have some procedures going forward. But Mr. Short, any other comment? Does anyone have any other comments? Yeah.
If it doesn't pass, do we see it again next month?
We could put it on next month, yes.
Okay.
Would you prefer that, next 1 month? But it's just going to come on back next month. So we can either vote and it doesn't pass, or we try to see if it passes now, but I'll agree to 1 month.
Is your, just for clarification, is the purpose of extending it for a month to give us more time to reflect? Or, I'm just concerned that we'll just have the same conversation again next month.
We'll probably have the same conversation.
Yeah.
We had it last
Right,
month
right,
and the
right.
month
That's what I'm
before.
concerned is, we really have no idea what impact on this Eli is having here. We are thinking we're doing best for her,
Okay.
which is wrong.
I think you have another comment, but otherwise, go ahead.
I have no instinct that raising this objection is doing anything good for Miss Eli or anything bad for Miss Eli. But my experience has been that sometimes on certain kinds of points, change at the Loft Board is incremental, and sometimes it requires a burr under the blanket of the Loft Board to do that. And for example, we had a couple of cases that were on the ropes for a few months, and then lo and behold, we had more Loft Board members here, and it was passed over some no votes. So expedience is saying, well, we can't move this forward. Maybe you can if you had 9 members here. We have 9 members, but we don't have 9 members here today.
Right.
Now, I would be interested to hear exactly what the chairman is proposing to consider being discussed in the rulemaking process, if this is of concern.
I'm only making a promise and for this to be a debate item and to get some rules. I don't know what the proposal is. That would be the board's rules, not mine.
To debate exactly what?
What can be required, before we accept, for on these types of applications, what must be presented. We'd have to put that in a rule. I can't say you can't have settlements, right? Settlements have to be, but right, is the board going to say there must be reasons, there must be all the time reasons given as to what, or not reasons, but details of settlements?
Well, it's not a settlement, it's a withdrawal. We have information about the
What
settlement.
is settlement? I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's vote.
Let's vote. Ms. Rivera, sorry, any other comments? No, Ms. Rivera.
Mr. Vargas.
Pass.
Is pass illegal?
It's possible I can vote after the roll is taken.
Oh, he will vote after, okay, so it's a pass.
Possible.
He's not voting right now. but-
Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez.
Yes.
Mr. Delaney.
No.
Ms. Torres.
No.
Ms. Rosen.
No.
Chairperson Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
No.
I'm sorry. 3 three in favor, 4 against, 2 absent.
So if I have a math degree, so that doesn't pass.
5.
Thank you, motion does not carry. We have 6 cases. 6? On the master, yes. We have 6 master calendar cases. The first case is Alexander Kosovaval at 58 East 11th Street in Manhattan. That docket number is TN0222. Ms. Cruz will present this case.
The occupant of the 6th floor unit filed an application seeking a finding that the owner of the building is not in compliance with the legalization timetable. In a stipulation of settlement, the tenant agreed to withdraw the application if the owner obtained a residential certificate of occupancy before December 31st of 2015. The owner failed to obtain the certificate of occupancy for the building. The proposed order before you remands the application to oath for adjudication of the tenant's non-compliance claim.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Is there a motion to accept this case? Ms. Rosalind, is there a second? Mr. Barowitz? And any comments on this case? There are no comments, therefore, Mr. Rivera, could you please poll the board members?
Mr. Barber.
Yes.
Mr. Roach.
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez.
Yes.
Mr. Delaney.
Yes.
Ms. Torres.
Yes.
Ms. Grossman.
Yes.
Chairperson Hudson.
Yes.
7 in favor, 2 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. The next case on the master calendar is Stabit, Always, Rhea Katz, and Raxon Peleg at 199 through 201 North 8th Street in Brooklyn. That docket number is TR 1170, and Mr. Clark will present.
Thank you, Chairperson Hilton. Board members, occupants of the 2nd floor unit in the building filed an application for coverage and protected occupancy status, and owner answered. After a hearing, the administrative law judge recommended the Loft Board grant tenant coverage and protected occupancy claims and deemed Ms. Katz's protected occupancy claim withdrawn. Tenants seek coverage of the front, middle, and rear portion of the 2nd floor in the building and the rear hallway. Owner argues only the front portion of the unit should be covered because the remainder of the unit was used for commercial purposes. However, the record shows that tenants residentially used the entire unit and any commercial activity was incidental to the residential use. Owner also argues that pursuant to case law, tenants cannot claim residential occupancy or primary residency of the unit during the window period because they deducted the majority of the rent for the unit as a business expense and listed a different home address on their window period tax returns. However, tenants provided sufficient evidence that their residential use of the unit, that they residentially used the unit during the window period. In opposition to tenants' protected occupancy claim, owner argues tenants sold their rights to the unit in 2010. However, in the 2010 agreement, there was no mention of Article 7C rights, and a reduction in the security deposit for payment of rent is not consideration for Article 7C rights. Finally, owner argues tenants did not prove primary residency because they listed a different home address on their tax return. However, the record includes documentary evidence such as bank statements and a voter registration that indicates tenants used the unit as their primary residence. The proposed order before you today grants coverage of the entire unit and the rear hallway, grants tenants protected occupancy claim, and deems Ms. Katz's protected occupancy claim withdrawn.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there a motion to accept this case? Mr. Delaney, second. Mr. Barowitz. Any comments on this case? Ms. Rivera, could you please poll the board members?
Mr. Barber.
I was going to say one thing. I just wanted to point out that I was in a community board meeting in my neighborhood as a citizen, and the landlord stood up and started talking, so I left the room because I was afraid that she might say something then, and I wouldn't be able to vote, so I left the room. I just want to report that. That happened a few months ago.
Thank you for the record. Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Rivera?
Mr. Barber.
Yes.
Mr. Roach.
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez.
Yes.
Mr. Delaney.
Yes.
Ms. Torres.
Yes.
Ms. Rosen.
I recuse.
Chairperson Hudson.
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 recused, 2 absent.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Thank you, Mr. Clark. The next 4 cases on the master calendar usually are, but I'm sorry, we're going to remove and lay over until the next table, I'm sorry, not remove. We're going to table case number 11, which is West 28th Street Holding LLC, docket number that's 40 West 28th Street, Manhattan, docket numbers LE0653 and RA0015 for next month. The next 3 cases on the master calendar are removal cases. They're voted on as a group. They are Malak Premises Trust, 104 through 106 Green Street in Brooklyn, and that's LE0674. Then 95 Grand Street LLC at 95 Grand Street in Manhattan. That is Manhattan, correct?
Yes.
Yes. LE0707 and 39 Ainsley Street LLC at 39 Ainsley Street in Brooklyn, docket number LE0714. Is there a motion to accept these cases?
I was wondering, just a comment, I don't know if I make it now or after.
Oh, after the motion.
After the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Delaney, motion, are you going to make a motion to accept?
Sure.
Second? Sorry, then Ms. Go ahead, you can start comments.
No, I just like as a matter of public record to just say the number of units that end up being IMD protected
You mean
occupant
in
versus.
each of these?
Yeah, and whether it went from residential or to commercial.
Three buildings that are leaving jurisdiction of the plot board.
Do we have those numbers available? Yes.
So for 104, 106 Green Street, there were originally 6 units. All 4 are remaining residential, 2 are market rate, and 4 are rent regulated.
All 6.
Huh?
All 6 residential.
All 6 residential,
Yeah.
but 2 are market and 4 are rent regulated. For 95 Grand Street, it's 4 residential units, all market rate. And for 39 Ainsley, it's 2 units, both commercial.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Rivera?
Mr. Barber.
Yes.
Mr. Roach.
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez.
Yes.
Mr. Delaney.
Yes.
Ms. Torres.
Yes.
Ms. Rosen.
Yes.
Chairperson Hudson.
Yes.
7 in favor, 2 absent.
So who's ready for rules? Nobody. I understand. Are there any comments before we close the meeting? Okay. Good. So this will conclude our September 19th, 2019 Loft Board meeting. Our next public meeting will be held on Thursday, October 17th, 2019 at 2 p.m. at 22 Reed Street, right here, Spectre Hall. Board members, please sign and hand in your attendance sheets. Thank you and have a good afternoon.